One way to see strength is to understand the anatomy of strength. In the first 3 years of life, the brain experiences massive growth. Billions of synaptic connections are made. As we mature, however, nature forces specialization. As attention is drawn to certain activities, interests, and pursuits, robust neural networks in those areas are developed, and knowledge, skill, and ability in those areas are advanced. Conversely, other areas wither and become reduced. These broadbands in our brains are the basis of our strengths. Individuals on the spectrum tend to be even more asymmetrical in their strengths and their non-strengths than individuals who are not on the spectrum. We often hear about and observe firsthand individuals with very pronounced, often extraordinary abilities caused by these asymmetries. This represents tremendous career opportunities if we can find the right niches in the workplace and the right avenues to give expression to these strengths. In her book, The Autistic Brain, Temple Grandin describes yet a further layer of specialization that is unique to those on the autism spectrum. She compares the brain to an office building. On the top level is the CEO, the prefrontal cortex, who is in charge of executive function, strategizing, synthesizing multiple sources of information, consolidating options into a solution, making decisions, etc. Below the CEO are the VPs, the frontal, parietal, occipital, and temporal cortexes. They're responsible for a subset of functions, or departments, if you will. Below the VPs are the individual contributors, or the workers, in the various departments who perform specialized tasks and work processes. She points out that in a typical office, there is normal communication, more or less, among the different areas of the building. People taking the elevator to talk to someone on another floor, people communicating via phone, emails, etc. She draws a corollary to the quote normal brain, in which communication between different areas is relatively fluid and effective. She suggests that in the autistic brain, there's a higher level of impedance, if you will. The brain might not dial certain numbers, or might have faint connections to certain areas of the building, or the elevator might not go to a certain floor. The result of this impedance is overdevelopment and underdevelopment, which represents both challenges but also opportunities. Because individuals on the spectrum do much of their thinking and thought processing in specialized areas, they can become exceptionally strong in those areas. So the second element of building a strengths foundation is to understand the anatomy of strength. By understanding that we're not looking at an overall cognitive deficit in the majority of cases, especially with people on the high end of the spectrum. Rather, we're looking at specialized, asymmetrical abilities. Not only do we gain an appreciation for those abilities, but we can begin to understand and appreciate how individuals on the spectrum process information, how they think and perceive, and we can better understand how to interact with them and better enable their development. The third element of building a strength foundation is to build a career identity. In our First Ascent career workshops, we see many young people whose self-belief has eroded over the years because a strength foundation was not sufficiently laid. When these individuals enter adult life, college, or career, hard realities batter them, and over time their self-belief sort of goes into hiding, and their strengths become an abstraction. I've seen many 23, 24, 25-year-olds on the autism spectrum who can talk in astonishing depth and detail about subjects that fascinate them. Sometimes these are fixations for them. Automobiles, trains, paleontology, World War II vehicles and weaponry, etc. But when we start talk about how to parlay those passions into a career, there's excuse after excuse as to why they can't do that. They're much more talking about their interests in the abstract because the prospect of actually turning that into a career is just too frightening. Like building a building, until a foundation of self-efficacy is formed fully, it's very difficult to construct a career. The stronger the foundation, the higher you can build the career building. The younger you can build that foundation, the easier it is by far. We should actively begin developing a career identity and charting a career course as early as 12. So we need to operationalize the idea of a career in their minds. By talking early and often about how their strengths align to certain careers, they can begin to develop a mental construct of a career, an expectation of a career, and the ambition to have a career. The next step is to find ways to operationalize interests, passions, and fascinations. So, for instance, if your son asks endless questions about physical objects, cars, trains, machines, etc., and plays Legos for hours on end. This could be the beginning of aligning him or her toward a career in the engineering field. A next step might be to download a 3D modeling program like Google SketchUp, or Autodesk offers a student version of all of its software to students for free, and get him or her to draw a car or a building or a train, whatever fascinates them. If that goes well, try enrolling him or her in an engineering or CAD class or design class, all of the time talking about career possibilities. The magic happens when we can marry aptitude and interest, high math aptitude, and high visual spatial ability with robotics or bridges or buildings, etc. From there we can do projects at home that involve mechanical, visual, spatial things. For instance, my son and I restored a 1965 Ford Mustang, which became his first car when he was old enough to drive. Ask friends and acquaintances who are engineers and drafters to do informational interviews with your son or your daughter. Take him or her on a tour of a work facility, describe the day in the life, etc. I'm certainly not suggesting that everyone align to an engineering or manufacturing career. The idea is to create a clear and authentic vision of a career in which both you and your child can see him or her being motivated and successful. We're not talking about building an abstract or unrealistic expectation. The vision must become aligned with the right environment and must be operationalized. In the next video, we'll talk about how to align your child to the right career.